Am I too close? Okay. I have two microphones on. One is for the NSA, who is listening in. I'm sure. Actually, I kind of wish they would listen. One time. Are we okay, Wilmer and Jake? Everything good? Okay, very good. All right, so I guess, yeah. Anyway, two mics.
You're wired.
I am wired for sound. I know. It's really good to be with you all, and so wonderful to be able to sing again. I just can't get over singing in person after being out of that for over a year, really. So nice. Goodness sakes. And today is Pentecost. My constant thought is that we should all paint our fingernails red and orange and then wave them like this for Pentecost. Wouldn't that be fun? I am currently short on red fingernail polish. I haven't gone out. But Pentecost is a reminder that we gather in the presence of a living Holy Spirit. And so this living and life-giving Spirit makes this gathering different from a club. So we're not a club. We don't just gather to club around. We're not just a bunch of friends having a potluck, although hopefully we will have a potluck one of these days, and that will be great. By the way, I just went to an amazing barbecue restaurant in Pueblo at a pastor's meeting this week. Have any of you been to Gigi's in Pueblo? I highly recommend it. Anyway, that's just free advertising. We are not in the spirit of a group that needs to agree on everything. And this is, I think, an important point. If you look at the work of the Holy Spirit in the Bible, both in the Hebrew stories and in the New Testament, it is not the work of seeking agreement on everything. The old joke goes that wherever you have 2 or 3 Mennonites gathered, you have 4 or 5 opinions. Now, I think that is sometimes true. It was certainly true in college. I've had 3 or 4 opinions myself. But I think often the opposite is actually true. That Mennonites and everybody else tend to fall as quickly as we can into groups of agreement, as if that's why we were put on the earth, to all agree with each other. And so then we can have arguments over social media now. When I was in college, we had arguments on the opinion board. You post actual paper that you wrote on the opinion board, and that's how we carried on arguments back then. But now you can just do social media, I guess. I stay away from it as much as possible. Just my practice. But often the opposite is true, is that we are so eager to be in agreement with each other. And then, as we seek agreement, we start splitting until we can split enough until that split, is all in agreement. It's like Garrison Keillor tells the story of the church. I wish I could remember the name of the church. I looked it up and I couldn't find it. It was a church that was seeking doctrinal purity, And so the church was splitting and splitting and splitting to get more and more purity, until finally it was just Pastor Bob and his wife sitting on the front porch. And then Garrison Keillor says, and his wife was having second thoughts. So much for the agreement. Life in the presence of the Holy Spirit is not about merely seeking agreement. That's a very small game. It is about something much bigger, something much more capacious, something generous and resilient. That's what the Spirit's work does for us. That's why you have the miracle of all of the languages, of all the people coming together as the Spirit begins to work. The image is that this is a widening into a work for all. I don't know what that is. This is a widening into a work for all people. Now, in our text, you notice that it says the Spirit comes as a violent wind. And I like to imagine it as this wind blowing away all of our prejudices and our eternal verities. Do you know what eternal verities are? Those things that have to always be true for us all the time. It's an eternal verity. I say unto you. Anytime you're at a party and you find yourself telling somebody else, I say unto you, then you know you have a problem. Or if you end what you said with according to prophecy, that's another sign. But I like to imagine the Spirit blowing away our prejudices and our eternal verities and all the stuff that we just have to get other people to do or to believe in order for us to be okay to be with them. Seeking that absolute level of agreement. Instead, the Spirit whooshes in, and the order of the day changes to love, which flows into service and sacrifice and rejoicing. Those are all bigger than agreement. Service, sacrifice, and rejoicing. The Spirit blows among us. Wider than Congress, I'm not sure. I've never been in there to see. Now we have people in the Spirit overcoming differences and singing joyful, joyful, we adore thee together. So much bigger than agreement. We sing together, how can I keep from singing when life flows on? And again, we chose that hymn for this month because of that lovely line, the peace of Christ makes fresh my heart. Instead of my stale verities that I have to get everybody to agree with, the peace of Christ makes fresh my heart. The Spirit blows among us, rustling our papers and our shirt sleeves, and now it's not all about my exact identity. It's not all about my demographics or my politics or yours. Now it's about, look, I'd like to live nonviolently in God's good world. I'd like to honor this beautiful one earth of creation that God has given us. This spaceship earth on which we are all earthlings. God has come for all earthlings, if you will. I'd like to heal and repair all of those places that create refugees because of scarcity and of violence. I'd like to be about that, about places that create desperate migrants, willing to push their children across borders while sobbing with hope that there's some measure of safety and thriving available somewhere. No, we are not a club here. It's not that small. Just gathered around some rule book or some history or some tradition. It's much bigger than that. It's Pentecost. It's the Spirit coming as a violent wind, blowing all of that away, reminding us that we gather around a wind and a fire. We gather around whooshing change and burning transformation. We gather around love that moves, and kindness that works, and compassion that is both expressed publicly and intimately. Parker Palmer always says that the innermost part of ourselves is completely and intricately woven with the most public part of ourselves. And how we can get those to line up with each other is so important. He talks about, I don't know if you all know about the Mobius strip. I'm not going to go into it, but this Mobius strip that lines us together. You can look that up later on, or if you wait a few more weeks, I'll probably preach about it. I always get around to the Mobius strip eventually. But that weaving between our inner self and the public self, that's always there. This means that rather than having a closed faith, we have an open faith. In our worldly pursuit of superiority and security, we continually try to close things up. So often we try to close them up. And we put our beliefs in a box and we tie a ribbon around it. And it's a spiritual control game. Now I have it and you don't. I'm going to try to impart it to you, but I have it. That's the main point, is that I have it, and I'm going to control that. And that's not our faith. Our faith is an open faith. In our story about Moses at the burning bush, God will have none of this control game. God senses that Moses is angling for a little bit of control in that story. That's one way you can read that story. And for a bit of this control game, at the burning bush, you definitely do have to credit Moses for noticing the burning bush. I keep wondering how many burning bushes I have walked by on my way to go shopping. It's like, oh yeah, actually that might have been God. But, I do really need to go shopping, so yikes. But Moses notices and therefore engages God. But now, as we were reading, do we really want to engage God? That's a little bit scary. All of a sudden our lives may be reorganized. And so then when Moses learns what God is up to, liberation for the people, he says, God, who may I say is calling exactly? he wants to find out, because, God has put the fear of God in Moses. And so he says, who may I say is calling? And if I come to the Israelites and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? It's like Moses is being all polite, but he really wants to get a name so that he has some control going on here. And God basically says, oh no, you don't. The only name I'll give is I am who I am, which in Hebrew, as you may know, can also be translated as I will be who I will be. The verb is ambiguous in Hebrew, as it often is. And so then God summarizes by telling him, say, I am has sent you. I like how you read that, Dar. You got that good. I am. Because that's a funny name, isn't it? That's a name that's not a name. That's a name where you are not going to get control of this. It's kind of like when Scrooge, Marilyn and I are big fans of Christmas Carol. We especially like the 1984 George C. Scott version of the Christmas Carol. Love that movie. Even just watching this one scene just made me tear up again. I always tear up when Scrooge converts, which I think means that I probably still need to do some converting. But Scrooge, after his conversion, secretly sends a prize turkey to the Cratchit family and for their Christmas feast. And the family wants to know who sent it. And the delivery man will only say, anonymous. He wishes to remain anonymous. So, if you've seen that, you know that scene. Well, God doesn't exactly say to Moses, anonymous. But God does say, the only name you're going to get is I am who I am. That's all. And then there is a little recitation of what God has done. I was there with Sarah and Abraham and Jacob and so on. He does say that. But basically, God is saying this. I am the God of freedom and liberation, not the God that you can hold on to with your naming. So don't think we're going to start there. I'm the God of freedom and liberation. That's the whole point of the Exodus that I am sending you out on. Well, you may have heard me say that before, or you will hear me say it again, because I absolutely love that story of the burning bush. I think it's one of the most astonishing stories in the Bible, because in this story, God teaches us that God is greater than our clubbiness, greater than our eternal verities that we always have to believe. God is greater than all of this. It sets up perfectly that God is fire, God is wind that moves among us, transforming our lives. And the same tone is reflected in the book of Acts with the other text that we read. The Most High does not dwell in houses made with human hands, as the prophet says. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool, which is a reference to Isaiah 66, by the way. But here again, God is not interested in being tied down in our control games. And so we dare not say God is here or here, but not over there. That's not how it works. What you build, what you think is your own, what you think is yours, what you think is necessary, God is always greater than that. And sometimes we have to work our hardest to discover how that would be, because I sure know how great what I have is already. I like it. That's why I have it. It's mine. God is always greater than that. The Most High does not dwell in the house that I'm building. God says, heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. Try that on for size. Try controlling that. Try building that all into one place, heaven and earth. See if you can be in charge of all of that. Not likely. This is Pentecost. And we find ourselves living in the presence of God, who is greater than all our verities or our imaginings, and who is present among us as the violent wind of the Holy Spirit, who whooshes away all of our smallness and narrow-mindedness. God's at pains, it seems, to call us to something that is far greater and more beautiful and wider than oceans and grander than galaxies. And so again, we have an open faith, not a closed faith, not a smallness or a narrowness. And I'm going to invite you to read my blog for the rest of the sermon, because I think it reads better than speaks. But I have a whole series of contrasts of marks between open and closed faith. And they're really good, so go to soulreport.wordpress.com. This is really just a secret way to get you all to read my blog. Go to soulreport.wordpress.com. But there are things like this. An open faith stresses responsibility. Closed focuses on blame and name-calling and disrespect. An open faith listens with respect and persistence. Closed can't wait to jump in and shut down the noise of the voice of the other. Well, I know that trick. I was really good at that in college, back in debate mode. I'm just waiting until you shut up so that I can jump in with my wisdom and the goodness of my words. Wow. I have really tried over the years, and with some measure of success, but I still have a lot to learn, to be very, very interested in your voice, and to listen to the richness. And as Brenda Uland, she's one of my favorite writers from days of yore, who says she hated going to cocktail parties because she would have to listen to the noise of all the other people's voices. Like, ah! Then she realized all she had to do was listen, and listen longer than she was used to listening. And she said, usually what happened was, as they spoke, the well of words was kind of muddy at first, but then it would clarify the longer she would listen. And I love that image, that there can be a clarification of the voice of the other through deep listening. Powerful notion. Anyway, there are examples like that and many more at my blog, soulreport.wordpress.com. I put together a whole bunch of cool ones that I have gleaned from Parker Palmer, Ed Friedman, and from my astonishingly huge number of years as a minister. So, from my work as well. Life in the presence of the Holy Spirit is really something. It is quite a path, but I think it's a path that we can recognize. It is simply God calling for the better angels of our nature. So my prayer is today, may that wind blow among us and among those we love, and between us and our communities, and between us and our enemies. May the peace of Christ make fresh our hearts.